Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we've got an individual review. I haven't done an individual review in a long time, and I started to call my individual reviews back in the day just fragrance musings because I don't see them as being like a complete review, mostly because my opinions and thoughts are constantly in flux. So, what I'm saying today is what I truly believe to be true, but my feelings 6 months or a year from now might be different. So I'm always hesitant to do an individual review. I like the whole informal style where, it feels like I'm talking to a friend and we're just kind of, we're kicking rocks on the fragrances and just, discussing our feelings. But this fragrance came about based on kind of a series of events. I've had this for a long time. In fact, I had it so long, I got this bottle for about $80, and I saw bottles on eBay now for $1,000. That's how high the prices have risen. The fragrance itself is called Desprez Bal Versailles. Desprez Bal Versailles. There's the beautiful bottle presentation. This is the pure Parfum, and this came about because of the fact that yesterday, Liz Moores, the brand owner of Papillon, who created such beautiful scents as Salome, was kind enough to join my live stream. We did a live stream together, and we talked about her experience. Again, thank you, Liz. I've said it before, but I will say it again. The interviews that I've done with people like Liz Moores of Papillon, Russian Adam with Arige Ladore, those are some of the most important content I felt like I've been able to bring to the fragrance community so far, along with, all the other stuff, of course. But to me, I really think that's kind of the cream of the crop content because you hear directly from a perfumer. Both Russian Adam and Liz Moores kind of wear multiple hats, They're both perfumers and they're both brand owners. And unlike some brands who claim to be brand owners and perfumers, but aren't, Liz Moores and Russian Adam actually are the perfumers and the brand owners of their individual brands. There's no shadow perfumer. There's no ghost perfumer in the background creating the fragrances. She's actually doing it all. She's like a one-man band, so to speak. And so yesterday I wore Salome as my scent of the day. And normally, I've mentioned that Salome kind of reminds me a little bit of Diaghilev, which, by the way, I made Liz Moores a little sample set of animalic fragrances, and that's in the mail. I already mailed it to you, Liz, if you're watching. And some of the stuff she's never smelled, like she's never smelled Diaghilev, I included for her to sniff, along with a bunch of other vintage masculines, Koros, Joint by Rocco Barocco, Lapidus Porom, Antaeus Sport. I mean, I sent her a bunch of stuff, Bellamy, all kind of stuff. But yesterday when I wore Salome, I started to get more vibes of this, of Bal Versailles, than I did Diaghilev. And we got to talking about it, and she mentioned that she has Bal Versailles in her collection, and she shared the picture of the bottle with me, and it is the Eau de Cologne version, and she said it's very pillowy and talc powder, almost like talc powder, baby powder on her skin. There's very little animalics, and there's very little, there's very little sex on the skin, if you will. There's nothing raunchy. There's nothing sexy about that fragrance. It's almost just like a little kitten. And I said, really? Because my bottle of Bal Versailles, I think, does go somewhat animalic. And there's a civet note that I just did a fresh spray before I turned the camera on. I've got an 8-hour dry down on this hand. And the mid notes, the civet really starts to come out. It starts off feeling like it's going to be kind of a clean, powdery, oriental fragrance, if you will, with floral touches. But then the civet really starts to come out. There's a point where it just feels like a ball of civet. and I'll run through the notes, I'll run through the background, but I want to give you an idea of the type of fragrance that we're dealing with here, okay? So the category, you know, if I had to compare Bal Versailles to a couple other fragrances, I already mentioned Salome, but Salome has this Hyrax note, which I wish I got a chance to ask Liz about that note yesterday. I completely forgot, because Hyrax is a very tough animalic note to deal with. Some perfumers just say forget about it. They're not even going to deal with Hyrax because it's so hard to work with. And Western noses don't like that smell normally. But she used Hyrax here to perfection. So there's going to be differences. But the way the fragrance comes together, the impression that it feels, it is something like Salome, I would say. Now, to be fair, Bal Versailles came out in 62. That is 60 years ago we're talking about. And the story goes that at the time, in 1935, there was a fragrance that came out called Joy by Jean Patou, okay? And Joy was the most expensive fragrance. At the time, you know, there was no Roja Dove, there was no Xerjoff, there were none of these brands that had these ultra niche category. This was kind of the cream of the crop. And Joy came out in the Great Depression. So you have to remember, people were struggling financially. And they said, we don't care, we want to use the best ingredients. You know, they showed up almost like with a ring bearer's pillow with a bottle of Joy on it, and they brought it to the front door of their rich clients' houses. And I mean, only the uber rich could afford a bottle of Joy back then, because it was so lush and expensive, and the highest quality of ingredients were used, and that showed in the price tag as well. And this remained the most expensive fragrance, I think, to date, up until Bal Versailles came and dethroned it. And if you think about, you know, while I'm talking about some of these fragrances that it will remind you of, or I would say in a similar category, look at the picture. You can see there's a party going on. There's some, let's say they're in the great mirror, the great hall of mirrors in Versailles. There's a beautiful woman carrying flowers right here. And then, you know, his symbol, I think this is basically a harp. So you can imagine that there's music going on. You're at a ball in Versailles, in basically the headquarters of what they considered to be the enlightened cultural world back then, right? They considered themselves to be the bourgeoisie, the head of society, you know, the most important people in the world. If you were anyone who was anyone in France, you were invited to the ball at Versailles, right? And imagine it's the 1700s, and imagine how different things were back then, right? There was no running water. You couldn't just take a shower every day. The wigs were powdered with that. Liz Moore's mentioned that talcum powder smell, that baby powder smell. There is a little bit of that in here because of the fact that I think what Jean Desprez was trying to create was this impression of high society, bourgeoisie, you know, the 0.01 of society, the top of society, partying, enjoying themselves. But what else are they doing at a party? You know, there could be some lasciviousness going on. Actually, when Liz Moore's was creating Salome, she basically said this was supposed to be considered to be a post-coital fragrance. You know, what a body would smell like after the act of physical sex, right? And there's some of that in here as well. The briefs could be very similar. In fact, I would consider this to be kind of like a niche version of Bal Versailles. But just to give you a couple examples, of some fragrances that are in the same ballpark. And I rewatched our interview with her yesterday, and she mentioned that one of the fragrances that actually, you know, got her to want to create Salome was this. This is Serge Lutens' Musk Kublai Khan. And Musk Kublai Khan is an animalic musk fragrance from Serge Lutens, of course. This bottle is an old bottle, Shiseido. You can see it's a, oh, what do they call these? A Palais Royal. This is a Palais Royal bottle because you can see right there the Palais Royal symbol. This signifies it's basically just an older bottle, okay? But Musk Kublai Khan is in the same ballpark as Bal of Versailles. I actually struggle with this more because I have some personal memories attached to this fragrance that, you know, I just always get taken back to that point in my life every time I wear this. So I don't wear it too often, but I have enough juice, of course, to give it a full, a fair wear and talk about it on my channel. I have not reviewed or talked about Musk Kublai Khan very much at all. But there are similarities. And in fact, I think when we're talking about, you know, Bal of Versailles versus Salome or something like that, I think this is actually more musky. That's why I brought in Musk Kublai Khan, is the musky elements really will come out. But they're mixed with this floral element, and they're actually mixed with a floral touch, very similar in the same way that the florals are done in Jean Patou Joy. If you've ever smelled Joy, it's one of the most beautiful floral fragrances that you will ever smell. It actually also reminds me just a little bit, the florals will remind you a little bit of Amouage Goldman, which even though this is a Middle Eastern perfume house, they employed Guy Robert to be the perfumer here. And he did this fragrance in a very French style, right? So it's in that idea. It's also in the same range as something like Musc Ravageur. Now, this is a vintage matte cap bottle when it was a little bit more animalic. And the older bottles of Musk Kublai Khan are a little bit more animalic. And I think they fit into that, you know, Jean Desprez Bal of Versailles Pure Parfum fits into that mold. You know, it's musky, it's oriental, and in fact, the oriental, there is some vanilla that will give you slight touches of something like Shalimar, okay? So that's kind of the category it sits in. It's a very hard category to place because I don't really think it's a real oriental fragrance. It could be considered maybe a little bit of an amber. And there definitely are floral touches. Let me go through the note breakdown with you. So here's what the official note breakdown, and this Parfum version is discontinued. I don't know if they're still selling the EDC or EDT. I know there's a Bal of Versailles, or I think it's just called Versailles Homme that they did, that I would love to get my hands on and smell one day because I hear good things about that. So they did a masculine version of this scent, but to me, this is completely unisex. And this fragrance was famous for being Michael Jackson's signature scent. This is what Michael Jackson wore, and it actually fits him perfectly. You know, you can almost see him wearing this scent. As far as him picking a fragrance, he knocked it out of the park with one that would fit his personality perfectly because there's some feminine touches with the florals, but in the back, there's this very overt, old school, you know, almost like this hidden sexuality behind it, right? And Bal of Versailles kind of walks a very fine line, and it's a fine line that is very tough to walk because I think of, you know, the ones that we, if you're comparing Bal of Versailles, Musk Kublai Khan, Musc Ravageur, Joy, I think Salome is probably the one that is closest to my personal taste because I love the animalics. The animalics in here are what really attracts me, but I would struggle to wear this to work because I think this might be, if you're in a professional setting, this might be a little too much for people. The Hyrax might kind of put them off, which is basically, Hyrax is also known as African stone, I believe they call it. And the reason it's called African stone is it literally is a feces from a particular animal that lives in Africa, predominantly in Africa. and it hardens in the sun, and when they harden, they use a little bit of it. Kind of like, there's some weird animalics out there. Kind of like ambergris comes out of a whale. They don't know if it's the front end or the back end of the whale. But, those kind of animalics, they have to be used properly. And I do think it's used properly for the clientele for Salome. But there's a time and a place for this. With Bal of Versailles, I would feel much more comfortable wearing this out, if you had to go to meet your boss for lunch or something, If you were wearing Bal of Versailles, yes, there is a little bit of that sexuality, but it's a little more hidden. So the note breakdown is bergamot, jasmine, cassis, which gives a little bit of this pissy smell. If you ever hear someone say that Bal of Versailles smells pissy to them, yes, there is civet, and yes, civet can sometimes come across as pissy, but I think it's in the opening, it's the cassis that you're getting that gives this kind of like this pissy greenness, if you will. And there's orange blossom, neroli, rose, rosemary, and lemon. And again, remember, this is a fragrance they spared no expenses on. So in 1962, when this came out, this was the most expensive fragrance in the world. If you were a 10 millionaire, 50 millionaire back then, which was a lot of money back then. I don't think there were billionaires back in the 60s. This is the kind of stuff that you wore if you were posh. And the heart is lilac, orris root, and you definitely get that powdery orris. The orris root here is absolutely beautiful. But if you're thinking that it's going to smell maybe like something like a modern orris concrete, orris butter, whatever you want to call it, it smells very vintage, if that makes sense. It smells like the way that they used to use orris in the old days. Because remember, you're talking about a fragrance that's trying to recreate a ball at Versailles. And I always get the impression of like the 1700s. If you think about the times right before the French Revolution, there was that huge disparity between society, right? There were many people in France that were struggling just to eat and live. And then there were the very rich that were controlled a vast majority of the country's wealth. The king at the time was sending money and supplies and goods to America while we were fighting the war against the British for independence. And the people were pissed, they were not happy that the French king was living high on the horse while everyone else was struggling. Imagine that high on the horse feel of Versailles, right? That carefree, uber bourgeoisie, uber enlightened, sophisticated, that level of a party happening at Versailles, and that's what he's trying to recreate. That's what I am taken back to when I think about Bal of Versailles. So when I say that the orris root smells very vintage and very old school, I think it was done on purpose. They very well may have been able to make it smell more modern, but they wanted to give the impression that you are literally standing at a party with these ladies. This is not, I don't think this is a picture that was picked at random. This was the kind of the vibe that they wanted you to give. Women in corsets with real flowers, candlelight, and this beautiful harp. The stopper on the bottle, by the way, is shaped like the heart. I mean, look at the civet, by the way, that's like, it's turned the edge of the splash brown almost. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but it almost has turned it brown. It's like stained it. I mean, that's what real civet will do to a composition. At least that's what I'm assuming has stained this. But the design, the detail that went into the bottle, it's absolutely stunning. And I mentioned that I found this bottle for about $80 on eBay many moons ago. I can't remember how long ago, probably 3 years ago, 4 years ago, if I had to guess. And what ended up happening is Roja Dove actually highlighted this fragrance in one of his you know, he has this 5th floor of Harrods boutique up there. You know, he ran it for a long time before he founded Roja the brand. And he highlights perfumes that he thinks are culturally important or that were important in the progress of perfumery. And you know he loves vintage perfume. I know I give him a hard time for, you know, some of his fragrances coming across as clones of other fragrances, although I do love some of them. I mentioned how much I love Diaghilev, even though it's very similar to a Mitsuko Roches Femme combination with, you know, maybe a little bit of Azure by Estee Lauder thrown in there, right? Something like that. It's so I've given him a hard time, but he loves vintage fragrances, to be fair. And he's very knowledgeable, and he's kind of a connoisseur of vintage fragrances. And I think what happened was, once he actually highlighted this as one of the most important fragrances of the last 100 years or whatever it was in his boutique, word got out. And when word got out, all of a sudden bottles that were $60, $80 became $800 on eBay. You know, the scalpers really wanted to cash in. We'll get to price at the end. But let's finish going through the notes. So lilac, orris root, lily of the valley, patchouli, sandalwood. Sandalwood really comes through in the dry down. You get this very smooth, creamy, beautiful sandalwood in the dry down. Vetiver, I can't say I picked much up. It's probably vetiver acetate or whatever, you know, one of the most popular ingredients of perfumers. There's some ylang ylang as part of that, you know, French bouquet, if you will. Lilac, lily of the valley, ylang ylang, neroli, jasmine, orange blossom. Those are the flowers. And then the base is this resinous amber benzoin oriental base, okay? So you've got ambers. I mentioned the benzoin and resins and musk. Musk is a big part of the base, and you really will get that musk. You absolutely will get it. And you'll get some tolu balsam, and you'll get that vanilla. That's why I mentioned a little slight nod maybe to the orientals of the 20s, like Shalimar, Emerald, stuff like that. Cedarwood, which, you know, cedarwood, sandalwood combo, always a beautiful thing. And you'll get that, I think, mostly in the dry down. After the 4 to 6 hour mark, this is a very long fragrance. Wear time is basically all day. I mean, I didn't need to do a fresh spray, but I wanted to give you guys the opening again. And then, of course, the most important note is the civet. The civet is the most important note in this composition to me. I think it is what actually makes the fragrance. It's the very refined use of civet, okay? So don't think Kouros, all right? Kouros is absolutely its own beast, the way that Pierre Bourdon used the contrast of cleanliness with the dirty civet, with the animalis to come together. You know, this clean, fresh combo is brilliant. But the Kouros that you'll smell, or the civet that you'll smell in Kouros, is very different to the civet that's used here. The civet that is used here will almost remind you. There's a very expensive Arise Ladore fragrance that came out. I think it's $400, but it's worth it if you're a civet lover, because it's civet like you've never smelled. It's called Civet de Nuit. And I did an early impression on my channel. You can check it out if you would like. And Civet de Nuit was a composition that was created jointly between Russian Adam and Sultan Pasha. It's the first time they worked together, collaborated on a fragrance. That's the word I was looking for. It's the first time that Sultan Pasha and Arise Ladore collaborated on a fragrance, okay? And you get this civet that it's almost like a civet you've never smelled before, okay? Because it doesn't have that dirty civet you're used to smelling in Kouros and Lapidus Poron and all this other stuff that from the big animalic 80s. It almost has this like this warmth that you get, but it doesn't have that sharp dirtiness that you expect from civet. And the civet in Bal Versailles is almost like a little bit of both. It is a vintage feel where the civet is definitely there, and it gives off this dirty feel, but almost like in an amazingly attractive way. Okay, it's almost like it's enough to draw you in. You know what I mean? Like you're standing next to one of the girls at the actual ball, and even though she hasn't showered in 2 weeks, because I mean back then they drew a bath, they didn't shower, and they had to heat the bath up, and it was a big long ordeal. You couldn't just turn it on, turn it off, right? They had to bring the bath water in, and they had one of those standalone tubs, and they had to fill it up and all that stuff. It's a big ordeal. So they would powder their wigs. They would try to hide the smell with whatever they had back then, 4711 maybe, or whatever they used in the 1700s. Who knows? And, you know, there's that dirtiness, but also this sort of attraction, right? Liz talked about trying to create an accord with Salome or all of her fragrances that have this human skin-like element, and it's here. It absolutely is here. And you know, that just goes to show that that element of the warmth of a human body, especially after making love, or, you know, there was either a Base Notes or a Parfumo comment, or I forget which, but they were talking about the dirtiness of Bal of Versailles. And they were saying back during those parties, it was supposedly well known that many of the women that would attend would not wear any undergarments because it was easier to go to the restroom out back. You know, they didn't have a toilet back then, obviously. They went back in the outhouse or whatever it was. But with those big dresses, it was easier to go back there and just go to the bathroom if you needed to. And kind of with a wink and a nod, he was saying it was also easier if one of the lords came up and they, you know, needed a quickie or whatever it was. But there is that, you know, there's that fine line between fine French perfumery and dirtiness, right? And that beautiful powdery, floral aspect, some oriental aspect that, you know, you expect from some of the finest French fragrances that you can imagine with the highest quality ingredients. The ingredients in this fragrance are absolutely through the roof. If you're a lover of vintage perfumes, you will love the Pure Parfum of Bal of Versailles, 100%. I don't think anyone who loves Shalimar, Mitsuko, Val de Nuit, you know, L'Heure Bleu, if you love those kind of old school Guerlains, if you love the vintage feel, I don't think you can hate this. I think even if it's not your style, you will definitely, you know, you'll give it the wink and the nod and say, I can respect what Jean Desprez created with this. Jean Desprez created with this. And, you know, it's just so... It's a DNA that obviously people have riffed off of for a long time. This oriental floral aspect. But the way that the civet blends together, and what's interesting, I mentioned Civet de Nuit. Civet de Nuit actually uses a vintage civet. So what makes this so amazing is I think they use a civet that is estimated to be like 50 years old. And the civet in Bal of Versailles really reminded me a little bit of the civet in Civet de Nuit because it doesn't have that overtly skanky, animalic, you know, you don't smell it and go, oh, that's big time civet. And yet, at the same time, you smell this fragrance and go, wow, that is just a ball of civet, if that makes sense. There is this, there's this dichotomy in your mind when you wear this. And that's a very hard thing for a perfumer to do. I don't think it's easy for a perfumer to make something that is so overtly classical. You know, imagine standing at this party in the ballroom in Versailles. You're at a ball in Versailles, and some of, you know, one of the greatest pianists in the world is sitting there playing their piano in the background, and you're sitting there listening to this beautiful cultural exercise, right? Or playing a violin or playing the harp that's listed on the front, right? Imagine something like that, or reading a great piece of poetry or a book, or, you know, something intellectual, something that challenges your mind, that kind of level of intellectualism. And then on the other hand, you have that dirty side of it. But they managed to bring it together in a way where you can wear something like this and still feel cultured. You know, you won't feel out of place, I don't think, wearing this. It is a pure parfum, so it's not going to project like an EDT. It's not going to reach out and grab people across the room. But if they get close to you, you can bet your bottom dollar they will smell you, and they will realize that you smell much different from the stuff that's being put out today. And so I would say if you can find a bottle of this, if you're a lover of, you know, when I hold Bal Versailles in my hands, I feel like I'm holding like a cultural artifact in my hand. You know, I feel like I'm holding a piece of perfume history. If you feel the same way as I do about these vintage fragrances, this is definitely worth hunting down, okay? But you have to go in with pure expectations of what you're going to get. Now, today, it's 100 degrees outside in Texas. I wore this because yesterday I just wore Salome. It was fresh in my mind, and I was doing these decants for Liz, and I said, you know what? I'm going to wear this, and I'm going to talk about it on my channel. Do I feel like I did this fragrance review justice? No, I don't think I have the words to really describe the way that this scent feels. It feels like, you know, if it feels like the kind of fragrance, here's the best way I can describe it in one quick sentence. If you are someone who is not a fragrance connoisseur and you smell this, you could actually feel like you would hate this fragrance, like you would hate yourself for having it on. Like you could begin to hate yourself because you could smell it, and it's just so, you can get the civet. It is animalic. It has that piss smell, right? It has some of that dirtiness to it. On the other hand, if you're someone like me, or if you're a hardcore fragrance enthusiast, if you're a connoisseur, you could smell this and you could want more. Like it's not enough. Like you want more civet. You want more dirt. You want more, you know, you want more sex on the skin, if you will. And that's the dichotomy that Bal Versailles will give you. For someone who is newer to animalic fragrances, you may smell this and hate yourself. You might go, oh my God, I have to scrub this off. I can't take it, right? But on the other side of the coin, for the experienced people, I think that this is definitely something to, you know, to explore, to understand, to break down. And it's getting harder and harder and harder to find, unfortunately, as the bottle supply dries up. And the Pure Parfum is the one that I would go for if you can swing it. It sounds like, from what Liz was telling me, that the Eau de Cologne is maybe a little bit more baby powder, more talcum powder, powdery, floral, almost relaxing in a way. This is not that. This is intellectual. This is somewhat boisterous, somewhat cocky. I mean, if you're part of the 0.01% and you're at these parties, you're probably dressed in the finest threads. I mean, you probably feel pretty darn good about yourself. There is a little bit of a walk with a strut with this fragrance to me. That's the impression that it gives me. The note breakdown and actually breaking the scent down is very hard for me, because you're just hit with this beautiful powdery floral aspect, almost like the woman next to you just powdered her wig, right? And the florals hit almost like you're smelling Amouage Gold. And even though this also has civet in the dry down, the fragrances smell completely different to me. They do totally different things. And that's what's amazing. Two fragrances in the same genre, right? With similar stylistic touches. You know, this has that floral aspect that will harken back to joy. It has the civet. So there's big portions of the fragrance that are the same, and yet they can smell completely different. That's why I say, if you're a fragrance lover and you only watch, you only watch the YouTubers who talk about the newest stuff, or you only watch the YouTubers who talk about niche, or you only watch the YouTubers who talk about vintage, or whatever it is, you know, there is so much out there to explore in the fragrance world. And no matter what area you really like to go into, I always tell people to try and get your nose on as many things as you can, because it opens your mind up. You start to see how the pieces of the puzzle fit. You look at the fragrance progression over time with new eyes, you know. And this is one that I really feel like is a vital and important piece of the puzzle. This was a big deal in the 60s and 70s. And I think Roja Dove kind of re-highlighted what a big deal it was by putting it in the 5th floor of his whatever Harrods boutique or whatever you want to call it. And I think he's right for highlighting it. But it's a shame that it kind of sat on the shelf until someone shined some light on it. So that's why I wanted to do this review. I just wanted to, you know, talk about I mean, this is stitched by hand. You can almost tell it's a little, look, you can tell it's not exactly straight. You know, you can tell somebody stitched this by hand. The detailing on the inside, there's this beautiful soft, almost like a memory foam like material that it sits in. The bottle is absolutely stunning. I mean, it's a fragrance that a fragrance lover will love. You will love this scent. You'll enjoy wearing it. And I wanted to highlight it. You know, I probably did not do it justice with the review, but I did want to highlight it. So if you have experience with Bal at Versailles or any Jean Desprez fragrances, which actually this is the only Jean Desprez fragrance I own, surprisingly. Although I would love to try Versailles Homme, as they call it, one day. So, but if you have experience with this, or if you like this style, if you like the kind of fragrances like Musc Ravageur, Musc Kublai Khan, Joy, Salome, you know, those kind of fragrances, Amouage Gold Man, let me know. Let me know in the comments what you think. This is one that you're not going to see hyped. It's not going to make a top compliment list. You know, it's not even going to make the most animalic fragrances list because, like I said, it's not. It's not the most animalic. But what it is it's one of the best blends and one of the best uses of animalics. That's a good way to put it. One of the best uses of animalics to complement the entire composition. That's a great definition for it. And I said something very similar about Krizia Teatro alla Scala. Do I still have it here? No, it's under lock and key. But I said the same thing about Teatro alla Scala from the mid to late 80s. That's a Schiffer composition, and there's a civet note that just blends into that, you know, so smooth, so elegantly. The use of the animalics in that fragrance is spot on, and you get that feeling, the way that the civet is used in Teatro alla Scala. It might only be this fragrance that matches it in terms of just the way that the animalics are used. So get your nose on this if you can. If you've never smelled it, and then you do get a chance to smell it, I'd love if you come back to this video and leave a comment and let me know what you think. It is a fragrance, obviously, that's out of fashion. You have to be somebody like me who doesn't care what people think. You wear whatever you want. You explore anywhere in the fragrance world. So if you can find a deal on Bal at Versailles, I wanted to do a video talking about it, bringing it to people's attention. You know, worst case scenario, you know it exists. You can try and get a sniff from a friend if you can't find a full bottle at a decent price, which it is getting harder and harder to find. Do not pay $400, $500, $600, $700, $800, $900, $1,000 for this. Just don't do it. Okay, that's probably not worth it. But if you can find it for a couple hundred, $250 maybe even, that's pushing it. It's worth it. Grab it. I mean, it's pure Parfum. You can still see the sheen on my wrist from one spray an hour ago, right before this video. Oh, it's absolutely beautiful. The resins, it is an oriental base heavy with that musk, you know, that musk Kublai Khan musk and that animalics, and oh, it's amazing. But you have to like powdery fragrances because it is very powdery and very floral, beautifully floral, but very floral. If you're a guy who's like, I'll only wear something that says made for men on it, you may not like this, but don't shy away from it because it was geared towards women. It made my top 100. I love the fragrance. I love wearing it. I feel so posh, you know. I feel like a time traveler from the 1700s, and I just got back from the ball. You know, it has that feel to it, that that upper crust of society feel. You know, it has some of that, and it definitely will put a pep in your step. There's no doubt about it. But you have to be willing to go against the grain. So, anyways, that's my highlight. That's my thoughts on Bal of Versailles. If I wear it more and my thoughts change, I'll do another video. But for now, that's kind of that's what I feel, what I think about it. So if you have experience with Bal of Versailles, leave it in the comments. Any of the concentrations, but particularly the Parfum. That's the one that I have experience with. That's the one that I know. I don't really know the other ones. And if you have experience with Versailles Homme or any other fragrances from this house, actually let me know. I think this was the last fragrance Jean Desprez had anything personally to do with. I think he died pretty shortly after this fragrance was made. So this is kind of also like his last swan song. But anyways, that's my ramble on Bal of Versailles. I appreciate everybody watching, commenting, supporting. If you haven't watched my interview with Liz or Russian Adam, any of the interviews, I made a playlist of just the interviews where you can go click on that playlist and watch them. They are fantastic sources of information. They were so kind with their time, and you know, it's a blessing and an honor to get to know them. So I do appreciate everybody watching. Cheers, guys, and I'll see you again tomorrow with another video. Bye now.